Can you describe the process of coming from jail and then dressing up in your suit and everything like that before court? Can you describe the process? Like, do you take a shower? Do you, just that?
Sure.
Because I thought people would be interested.
My trial started. We started picking the jury February 14th of '94, and so it was 5 days a week in the court, and I got convicted and sentenced on April 15th, so 2 months. So 5 days a week for 2 months. I was in a cell with four other guys. It was a four-man cell. There was five of us in there. I volunteered to sleep on the floor because I knew I wouldn't be in there every day. And I just slid my mattress up underneath one of the bottom bunks. But eat breaks and everything in the cell, and they would come and get me and take me to this room where they had the lockers and where people could store personal items that were in jail. And so I'm not sure if I told you this. My mom, she's an angel. She's awesome. I'd have my clothes in there for the week, and I would change out right there. One of the officers stood there. Of course, they have to monitor you and make sure you're not getting any contraband or anything. But I would change into my civilian clothes, and this jailer, one of the jailer's names is Barney, Barney Fife, right? He was an older white guy, and he was good people, and he would, I can't tie a tie for shit. I can't tie a tie to save my life. So I'd get Barney almost every morning. Barney would tie my tie for me. I appreciate it, man. And so then I'd go to court, and they would escort me with all the other prisoners from the jail over to the courthouse, and it was an underground tunnel going underneath the street from the jail to the courthouse. Then basically take me straight to the courtroom, and I was sitting in there before the judge got there or anything. It would be me, my lawyer, the bailiffs, people out in the audience, my family or victims' families, or and then the DAs. Then throughout the day, you have the court proceedings. At lunchtime, they would take me and take me back to the jail and bring a food tray to me in one of the holding cells. Usually they'd put me off by myself. They had drunk tanks, processing tanks, where they would have a bunch of people in there, and sometimes they'd put me in there too. It didn't really matter, but if they had an empty holding cell, because I was civilian clothes and high profile stuff, I guess they were concerned about security. But eat lunch, go back, court for the rest of the afternoon, and then when I'd come back, just go through the reverse process of changing out my civilian clothes for the orange jumpsuit. And then once I got back to the cell, I'd then take a shower. I'd usually leave some money with one of the guys in the cell block there with me, and they would, during the day, you had an opportunity, you had a guard that came around, you could purchase items from the canteen. So I'd, get a Mountain Dew and a Snickers bar or something like that. I'd just give one of the guys there in my cell some money and say, hey, get this or that for me. And when I get back that evening, he'd have it for me. So, I told the guys, as I said, there's five of us in this four-man cell, and we had access to a TV that we could watch TV. I said, I'm going to be gone almost every day all day. I said, you guys, whatever you want to watch on the TV, you guys watch on the TV. I don't really care. The only thing that I want to watch is David Letterman. When Letterman comes on at night, weeknights, I said, I want to watch Letterman. I said, other than that, I don't care what you guys watch. And they're like, yeah, sure, French, no problem. And so I credit Letterman with helping me through my trial, because it was a way to decompress after sitting there in that courtroom all day, trying to process the reality of the situation and the evidence that was being presented. And a lot of it was very tough to listen to. A lot of it was very tough to go through, and extremely difficult to go through. So being able to sit back and have some levity at the end of the day before I went to sleep at night, it helped. It helped to decompress me a bit, bring back a sense of perspective. I was actually Madonna was on Letterman, and she's on there. F word this, F word that. Letterman's like, you can't say that. I'm effing Madonna. I can F and say anything I want to F and say. It was, it's, Madonna's from Michigan too, so yeah, homegirl. But all right, the not sure whose idea. I think it was the prosecution's idea to uh, take the jury to the restaurant so they could get a perspective on what the situation looked like and how the area and because all they're seeing is crime scene photos and diagrams on a whiteboard on a whiteboard chalkboard type thing. So they loaded up the jury on a bus and they put me in a van with, I'm in civilian clothes. Was I in civilian clothes that day?
Yeah, I've seen a picture and you were wearing a suit in it.
Okay. When we got now on the way from Wilmington, because we had a change of venue, we got the trial moved from Fayetteville to Wilmington, a different county, to try to get a fair jury, maybe one not quite so biased. In Cumberland County there in Fayetteville, the news, between my crime and the news coverage, I was demonized. And, when I can't argue with, what they were saying, not something that I enjoyed, but it's definitely, anyhow, we had a patrol car in front of us and a patrol car behind us going from Wilmington to Fayetteville, and that's about an hour drive, I guess. Well, when we reached the Fayetteville city limits, we picked up like 10 more patrol cars, and it looked like, that's no exaggeration, it looked like they were escorting a dignitary or something. I'm like, really, is all this security necessary? And the guards in the van with me, the officers in the van with me, they're like, this is Cumberland County, they do what they want to do. And so it really, we got there and there was officers on the roof and SWAT gear and police everywhere. I mean, police cars and off duty, in uniform. It looked like a circus. All the news outlets had their vans across the street with the towers for broadcasting and everything. And so yeah, I went into the restaurant and sat down with my lawyers at a table. One of my lawyers is like, any of this register? I'm like, nothing, man, because I thought I had an idea in my mind of what the inside of the place looked like, as far as like the booths and the layout and the lighting and everything. And wherever I came up with that, during proceeding up to that point in the trial, it didn't match what I was seeing sitting there. I mean, they'd made some changes to the inside of the restaurant after the crime, but not anything, no major floor plan changes or anything like that. And I told my lawyer, I said, I said, the one image that I thought I had in my mind of what it looked like in here, I said, it doesn't match this at all. And so we didn't really do much there. There was one of the DAs stood up and he pretty much gave a walkthrough of what happened where and in what sequence and everything. And then we left. And same thing when we left, just a huge motorcade. It's like, I said, I don't think the president gets this much security around him when he's traveling, right? And I don't know that it was unjustified or justified. I don't know if they've done it to try to make that much of an impression on jury. I don't know what their agenda or motive may or may not have been. But then they, we just all went back to the courtroom. Judge released us for the day, but I need to go back to my cell. Then the jury to go. Everybody else go. It was a very surreal experience sitting there and listening to people get up on the witness stand and describe my actions, what I said, what I done.
Do you feel like they were talking to you, or were they talking to the jury more, like
To the
directing?
jury, yeah, to the jury, yeah. Usually in a trial, unless you're on the stand, in a jury trial, unless you're up on the stand, pretty much everything is, and even the person on the stand, if he's answering questions from lawyers or district attorneys, they're still talking to the jury. The jury, aside from the judge, the jury is the most important aspect of any trial. Because, the outcome of the trial hinges on whether or not they pay attention or believe what you have to say.
Did you find that you had eye contact with them sometimes, like the people in the audience who were related to the victims?
I would, I, I didn't feel comfortable. I seriously hurt these people taking taking lives from their families or caused injury to them. And I would look at them occasionally. I didn't, they were on my left from the chair that I was sitting on, left rear, and so I would have to turn behind me to look at them. But every now and then I would just, like when they came in the morning or when we left for lunch or, at the end of the day or whatever, I would look at them, and some of them, the looks were hostile, and I get that. I completely understand that. Some of them were just kind of bland, just a stare type thing, not malevolent or anything, not hostile, but just. And then I saw one guy's wife that I killed, James Kidd, his wife. There was compassion, and we're trying to understand, and that threw me. It was. You kill someone's husband, and they look at you, and they're actually making an effort to understand and try to be fair in their judgment of you. It's a very strong woman. I still think about. She sent it. Did I mention the letter, the note that she sent to my lawyers to give to me? She came up to the back of the witness table, the stands there, where you got a barrier that separates the audience from the front of the courtroom. And she asked me also there if she could give my lawyer, give this note to me. And he's like, no. He said, you can give it to me and I can give it to my lawyer. And so he does. He takes it, he opens it up, and just glances at it real quick and hands it to the lawyer. And my lawyer reads it. He says, can he read this? He said, I can't give it to you, but you need to read this. And in this note, this is while the jury was out deliberating between life and death. This is at the very end of the trial. And in this note, she said, I forgive you and pray for the best for you in this trial. And at the time, it was about how it made me feel, and I didn't understand it from her perspective yet. But it was like the weight of the world eased up off my shoulders, because I thought, if this woman can forgive me after I killed her husband, then maybe these other people can find her.
That is very powerful.
Yeah, she's an amazing woman. She's an amazing woman. And now, years later, I finally understood what forgiveness is about, and what it did for her more than what it did for me. But I think I'm even more thankful that she was able to get rid of any negative emotions towards me by forgiving me. It's not that it absolved me of, my crimes or anything. But it helped her to put it in its place and not allow it to negatively affect her life, not allow me or my actions to continue to affect her in a negative way. So I've learned so much in here, showing emotions and life and love. God, it's been an incredible experience. One that I would rather not have gone through. If I could erase the crime part of it, I give anything to go back and change that night. But the experience in itself has taught me so much, and it's just that it came at one hell of a price, one hell of a cost. And to those families and to mine and to me personally. But I give thanks for the lessons that I've learned. I give thanks for I've learned that the most important lessons we learn in life, the real lessons that we learn in life, is going to give me the life sentences. All right. That, there was a lot of disconnect going on in my head. It was a situation I never, ever in my wildest dreams or nightmares could have imagined myself sitting in. A judge making a decision, or a jury making a decision whether I want to get life or death, life in prison or a death penalty. And so it was surreal in many ways. And I knew it was happening, but the ramifications weren't real to me yet. When I stood up and he started giving me the sentences, for the death of Pete Peru's, life sentence, after completion of that life sentence, for the death of Ethel Peru's, life sentence, and on and on and on. And so when he does my sentences, I'm like, okay, life sentences, got it. And then he starts on the other 9 charges, and these are numbers, all right? So assault with deadly weapon, 5 years. Assault with deadly weapon with intent to kill, inflict serious injury, 7 years. What? All right, on and on and on and on. Well, while he's calling out these numbers of years, I'm mentally adding them up in my head, and he gets done. And for these other 9 charges, it was 35 years total. And I had thought to myself, I got to do 35 fucking years. The life sentences didn't even register that, that's the 35 years is the least of my concern. I got 4 life sentences, but it didn't register in my head that I guess I wasn't able to process it yet. So like a week later, I was sitting in the processing dorm at Central Prison, and it finally hit me. Those 35 years, that's the least of my worries. I'm probably never going to see that. All right, I got to do 20 years at a minimum on each life sentence. That's 80 years. I was 22 years old. That's 102. All right, well, I was 23 at that time. So anyway, I was like, what, Andy? Why am I, and I thought about it. I was like, why was I so worried about the 35 years? But they were real numbers. You see what I'm saying? Those numbers were real. It was something I could grasp. The concept of a life sentence just wasn't anything that made an impact on me right away. My brain kind of shut that out, I guess. All right, so had I got the death penalty, I already knew several of the guys that were on, not several, a few of the guys that were on death row. We would see them in the hallway. They would be taking the guys that are on, and they wear blood red orange or blood red jumpsuits. So they're easily identifiable from the rest of the prison population at Central Prison. But they would be escorted by an officer. You might have 5 or 6 of them walking down the hallway with one officer escorting them to medical. And, and everybody else be out in the hallway with them. We might be going to chow. There might be 300 guys out in the hallway, and these guys on death row are just walking amongst us. Hey, man, how you doing? Hey, what's up? They see people they know or whatever, and shake hands and give each other a hug or whatever, and just keep moving. And so, when they went to chow, they came into the chow hall, not with the rest of us, but it was still regular population that was feeding them from the other side of the serving line. All right, so you had contact with them there. You had contact with them if they went to medical, if they were going to visitation. If they had to leave the unit that death row was on, and go down the hall. They didn't clear the hallways. They didn't isolate them or anything. They walked right there with us, and we had interactions with them. It's different from what I understand from a lot of states that have death row. A lot of states, their death row are locked in their cells. They're not allowed to come out in a day room amongst themselves. Our death row here in North Carolina, you might have 36 guys on a cell block, and whenever the count clears in the morning, whatever, say 6 o'clock in the morning, when the count clears, they click all the doors open, and you can come out of your cell if you want to. You can stay in your cell if you want to, but your door stays unlocked all day until that night at say 10 or 11 o'clock. They come through and they lock all the cell doors. But you're out all day long and sitting out in the day room and watching TV or reading newspapers or books or doing legal work. A lot of the guys on death row, more so than regular population, the guys on death row, they spend a lot of time in those law books. And, justifiably so.
Definitely don't want to mess with them because that's definitely someone who has nothing to lose. Well, yeah, what was the... Sorry, just trying to think of how to ask this the question. But... Yeah, okay, I was about to ask, so, yeah, I already asked you about Buddha, and the... Okay, well, I would like to ask about this. Can you describe your first day in prison?
All right. That's a first day after I was sentenced, or the first day in prison period after I was sentenced.
Oh, that would actually be interesting to specifically go after you're sentenced.
Okay. I was transferred to Central Prison. Well, the guards in New Hanover County, Cumberland County was actually transporting me because they had jurisdiction, they had authority over me. They brought a bulletproof vest, told me I need to put it on. I was like, for what? They said, in case there's an attempt on your life. I was like, and look, I said, if somebody's going to do something to me, they're going to do it. I said, I'm not going to wear a vest. I said, that's not happening. They're like, are you sure? I said, yeah. And so I'm squeezed in between these two big officers anyway, in the back of a car, and again, a chase car in front back, and we got to Central Prison in Raleigh. About a 2-hour drive, I guess, an hour and a half, maybe, something like that. And when you go into prison, you have to go through processing. And so the first thing, you get strip searched, and that's like the movies, they don't shave you and make you shower or delouse you or anything, not here in North Carolina anyway. But it's the strip search, and you get issued prison clothes, and the civilian clothes that I had on, I had to send home. Whatever small amount of property I had was searched through and everything, and I was allowed to keep, at the time I smoked, so I was allowed to keep my cigarettes and my Bible and paperwork from the trial. I hadn't really accumulated any type of property while I was in jail. So they put me in, used to have two processing dorms at Central Prison. One was called K dorm, the other one was O dorm. I was in K dorm. So I'm in a bunk in a cell block with I don't know, there's probably 100 people in there. It was pretty packed. Prison overcrowding is a very real thing. So I'd already had a little exposure to Central Prison as far as they house me at what they call safekeeping at Central Prison. That's for pretrial detainees, mental health, and regular population. You wear a jumpsuit, different color. A death row wears a red jumpsuit, and the safekeepers, the pretrial detainees, they wear a yellow jumpsuit. So now I'm wearing brown pants. Back then it was white t-shirt. And, nervous, yes. And you don't forget the smell. Many of you have probably been to a retirement home or a mental health facility. You have that institutional smell. And it's a mixture of feces and urine, vomit, and unwashed bodies, and then all the chemicals that they use to try to cover up those smells. Um, and I remember that distinctly when I first got into the dorm there. I was like, or first walking down the hallways of the prison. I was like, smell this probably for the rest of my life. And in some ways, yes, some ways, no. Some prisons are better than others. Some cell blocks are better than others, or others, depending on the perspective. But I was on a top bunk, which wasn't really great because I was still using a cane at the time. I'd been shot, 5 of the shots hit my legs. So I had numerous bullet wounds in my legs, so climbing up and down off a top bunk wasn't the easiest thing in the world, but I didn't complain about it.
I gotta say, your face is was well reconstructed. I mean,
The,
well, you had cause it doesn't really look like, cause I see the scar, but I can
there's
tell,
a little scar here,
yeah.
and
Oh, I
right
see it.
here, and right here. The bullet hit over here in the front. This was the first shot thing, and it shattered my jawbone here, broke through the skin, and it actually exited over here. He, I was in contact for quite a while with the nurse that I woke up to in the ICU over there. After a while, we developed a relationship, writing to each other, or she'd come and see me. And I asked her one time, I said, do you know the name of the doctor? You know the doctor that done the surgery, stitched up my face? She said, yeah, I know him. She said, I'm friends with him. I said, could you do me a favor and please tell him that I said thank you? Because when I was at Central Prison right after it happened, my face swelled up like a softball, and I knew that I'd been shot in the face, and I just couldn't get up out of bed to get to a mirror, and I had all these visions of how mangled I might be for the rest of my life in my face, scar damage, tissue damage, and when I was finally able to get up and they let me use a razor to shave and everything, the swelling had gone down by that time. And I still had the stitches in there, but I was looking and I was like, wow, he did a great job. And after the stitches came out and the healing process set in, I told her, I said, please tell that man that I said thank you because he did an incredible job. And I'm very grateful. I just killed 4 people. And he had to, as a doctor there attending, he had to have known that. And he, regardless of what I had done, he was still professional and done his job, and he done a very good job. And I explained it to her. And so next time she came back to see me, she's like, I talked to the doctor, and I don't remember his name. And he said that, you're welcome, that he treated you no different than he would have treated anybody else. I was like, man, I respect that. How do you would think that for most of us, the crime would color your treatment of the individual. I don't know, influence how well you did your job, I would think, maybe. I don't know, I guess that says something about me, but how do you compartmentalize what this person's done and just do your job and do the best you can doing that? And so I respect that. I respect what he did for me. He didn't do it for me personally. It was just his professionalism, and I respect that.
You still talk to the nurse today?
I haven't spoke to her since 98. 98, I think, is the last time I spoke. Maybe, no, I'm sorry, 2001 would have been the last time I spoke to her. We had a pretty decent relationship for a good number of years there. We got pretty close. Even though she's married, I had 5 kids, beautiful, just gorgeous. And we wrote letters to each other daily, and my mom would come the first week of every month to visit me at Central Prison, and this woman would come the other 3 weeks. And we developed feelings for each other, and it got to the point where she actually brought up the possibility of us getting married, and that's when I had to take a step back and be like, wait a second, this is someone's life that I'm dealing with here, her family, her kids. Not that I cared too much about him, but her husband. And I told her, I said, if I was not in prison, I said, if I hadn't committed this crime, you probably would have never spoke to me had you seen me on the street. I found out we went to some of the same places, but I'd never seen her out there. I said, you probably would have given me the time of the day. She said, yes, I would. I said, no. I said, I don't think you would have. I said, she's way out of my league. And I said, but if I was out there and we developed a relationship, I would jump at the chance. I said, I wouldn't hesitate a second to make you my wife. I said, I would love to have you as a life partner. But I'm in prison probably for the rest of my life. It wouldn't be fair to you. It wouldn't be fair to me. It wouldn't be fair to your kids. And really, it wouldn't be fair to your husband. And I said, so, no, I'm not going to be able to do that. And that was the beginning of the end of the relationship. She understood where I was coming from. She wasn't happy. It hurt her. I know that. I understand that. But it's like I explained to her, I can't. I can offer emotional support. And that's, advice. I can listen. But other than that, I can't be there to hold her. I can't be there to help provide for her and her kids. I can't, we can't have a physical relationship if there's, I just knew that I couldn't, as much as I wanted to, I couldn't be that selfish. She would have done anything. She always asked me, do you need any money? Do you need this? No, I'm good. That's not why I'm in a relationship. I don't want your money. I don't want you to buy things for me. I'm good. And if I need money for legal help or something, I know she would have had no problem doing that for me. I just couldn't take advantage of our relationship like that. I didn't. I couldn't. I didn't want to be selfish. And I've had guys over the years talking about, man, you're an idiot, man. You should have rode with her till the wheels fell off. Yeah, but I wouldn't have been able to look myself in the mirror after that. I can't. The integrity's a tough thing. It's you have to make hard choices sometimes, and they're not often. They don't often benefit you in the immediate material gain and whatnot. But in the long run, you're able to respect yourself. You're able to look yourself in the mirror and be okay with the person that you see. And given some of the choices that I've made over the years, pretty okay with who I see in that mirror. Again, would I like to change my crime? Yes. Would I like to be able to go back, get those people their lives back? Yes, absolutely. But as a result of this experience and what I've learned, I'm okay with that guy that I see in the mirror. My mom, before she passed, when she was dying, she told me, she said, baby, I'm so proud of you. I said, Mom, I'm sitting here with 4 life sentences. I'm probably going to die in prison. How can you be proud of me? She's like, because you went in there, you stood up for yourself. You're not ever letting anybody take care of you. You're in there for a time you don't remember committing, and you carry yourself like a man with your head held high in your dignity. She said, I'm very proud of you. She said, not many people can do what you've done. Having her put it to me that way, I had to look at it. I was like, maybe I'm being a little too hard on myself. Maybe I'm not quite as bad as.
So it's just like those kind of a thing. So I get that.
And if you don't mind, that I was talking to somebody just a couple days ago, and I was like, I said, this is something.
Yeah, and I can see both sides of the argument on it. From my perspective, it's not going to matter how much time I do in prison. I'm never going to be able to forget, or I'm working on the forgiveness aspect of it, but I'm never going to be able to forget what I done to those people, the the harm that I caused those families, the lives that I took. That's something that's going to be with me for the rest of my life, regardless of where I'm at, in here or out there. And it's something that I live with daily, and uh, it's definitely not easy. I don't see myself generally as a bad person, but knowing that I caused that much pain and loss of life and just disrupted so many families like that is I struggle with that daily still. I mean, it's 30 some years later now, and uh, all right. So and then so of course, but on my side, I want to get out. I want to have a chance to go out and live in society and be with my family and friends. And some people that they're going to say, you know what, you took 4 lives, you don't deserve that. You killed one of my family members, you don't deserve that. And I understand that, I do, because I don't know how I would feel. If I'm honest, I think that I would probably hold a grudge against this person too, if somebody done that to one of my family members. Um, I would hope that they would be kind enough to give me that opportunity. Um, I would not. I would be leaving North Carolina anyway. I've got family and friends in other states that and probably end up going to a family member's place in Texas. And so they would never have to worry about me again in North Carolina. Coming in contact with them, I'm not going to be stalking anybody or anything like that. That's I didn't know these people to begin with, and I'm extremely sorry that it happened, that I disrupted their lives and hurt them like I did. But yeah, I have no desire whatsoever to cause them any more harm or pain. Um, I would hope that they would never hear from me again or hear about me again. I don't want them to have to relive that and have to dredge up that loss and that hurt. I don't want them to have to do that.
You would never go back
Um,
to North Carolina, basically?
no, sir, not unless they brought me back for some type of legal, procedure or something. Yeah, I would leave the state, and if I've told other people, I said if I was living in Florida and had to go to New York, I'd fly to Omaha to get around this state. Not coming back to North Carolina. It's a beautiful state. There's some beautiful, places in it. And I just, you know, I know that there's got to be a number of people that don't want me around, and I respect that. Um, I I completely understand that. I look at it in one way. My dad was a very, very abusive individual. He, if he had went to prison and for the abuse against my family, me, my sister, my mom, if he had went to prison for that stuff, would I want him? I know that there's a difference between abuse and killing people. I understand. All right, but I'm just trying to look at it from a perspective that would, if they came to me someday and they said, hey, your dad's trying to get out of prison, are you going to stand in his way? He's done this, he's done that, he's changed, he's made efforts to become a better person. Are you going to stand in his way of having an opportunity to get out? And I think that that's pretty much how I would look at it. Is that if he promised to stay away, if I had his word that he would stay away from our family for the rest of his life, then yeah, because he's going to have to live with, much like I do. Well, he's dead now, but he would have to live with what he done to our family. Um, I would hope that it's something that he would not just brush aside as something that just happened. Minimize it, because I know that I can't. I know that I can't. And I've had people tell me before. They said they'll be like, Kenny, that's the reason you're who you are is because you understand the magnitude of what you've done and you feel that you're remorse for it, you know. And I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't take away what I done, you know, and I can't take it away. I can't, no matter what happens. But yes, I would definitely like to see myself getting out, and I could definitely understand why others wouldn't want me to. You know, from my perspective, I don't. It's not going to matter how much time I do in prison. I'm never going to be able to forget, or I'm working on the forgiveness aspect of it, but I'm never going to be able to forget what I done to those people, the harm that I caused those families, the lives that I took. That's something that's going to be with me for the rest of my life, regardless of where I'm at, in here or out there, and it's something that I live with daily, and uh, it's definitely not easy. I don't see myself generally as a bad person, but knowing that I caused that much pain and loss of life and just disrupted so many families like that is I struggle with that daily still. I mean, it's 30 some years later now, and uh, all right. So and then so of course, but on my side, I want to get out. I want to have a chance to go out and live in society and be with my family and friends. And some people that they're going to say, you know what, you took 4 lives, you don't deserve that. You killed one of my family members, you don't deserve that. And I understand that, I do, because I don't know how I would feel. If I'm honest, I think that I would probably hold a grudge against this person too, if somebody done that to one of my family members. Um, I would hope that they would be kind enough to give me that opportunity. Um, I would not. I would be leaving North Carolina anyway. I've got family and friends in other states that, and probably end up going to a family member's place in Texas. And so they would never have to worry about me again in North Carolina. Um, Coming in contact with them, I'm not going to be stalking anybody or anything like that. That's I didn't know these people to begin with, and I'm extremely sorry that it happened, that I disrupted their lives and hurt them like I did. But yeah, I have no desire whatsoever to cause them any more harm or pain. Um, I would hope that they would never hear from me again or hear about me again. I don't want them to have to relive that and have to dredge up that loss and that hurt. I don't want them to have to do that.
You would never go back
Um,
to North Carolina, basically.
no, sir, not unless they brought me back for some type of legal, procedure or something. I would leave the state, and if I've told other people, I said if I was living in Florida and had to go to New York, I'd fly to Omaha to get around this state. Not coming back to North Carolina. It's a beautiful state. There's some beautiful, places in it. And I just, you know, I know that there's got to be a number of people that don't want me around, and I respect that. Um, I I completely understand that. I look at it in one way. My dad was a very, very abusive individual. He, if he had went to prison and for the abuse against my family, me, my sister, my mom, if he had went to prison for that stuff, would I want him? I know that there's a difference between abuse and killing people. I understand. All right, but I'm just trying to look at it from a perspective that would, if they came to me someday and they said, hey, your dad's trying to get out of prison, are you going to stand in his way? He's done this, he's done that, he's changed, he's made efforts to become a better person. Are are you going to stand in his way of having an opportunity to get out? And I think that's pretty much how I would look at it, is that if he promised to stay away, if I had his word that he would stay away from our family for the rest of his life, then yeah, because he's going to have to live with, much like I do. Well, he's dead now, but he would have to live with what he done to our family. Um, I would hope that it's something that he would not just brush aside as something that just happened. Minimize it, because I know that I can't. I know that I can't, and I've had people tell me before. They'll be like, Kenny, that's the reason you're who you are, is because you understand the magnitude of what you've done and you feel the remorse for it. You know, and I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't take away what I done. And I can't take it away. I can't, no matter what happens. But yes, I would definitely like to see myself getting out, and I could definitely understand why others wouldn't want me to.
Interesting thing that I think I should point out is this wasn't able to be recorded, but you met a guy who was friends with one of the victims
Oh
that were
yes,
affected, and you should explain that. I would think that's a good example of
sure, sure.
facing, that.
I was at another facility,
What
and
year was this, by the way?
just let's see, maybe 2000, 2021, 2022, something like that.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
been a while.
just a few years ago. Um, I was out on the rec yard one day, and somebody called my name, and this guy turns around, and he's like, "You're French?" I was like, "Yeah." He said, "Kenneth French?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Man, I'm really aggressive, with some anger in his demeanor." He's like, "I'm really good friends with the family of those people that you killed." And I'm like, "Man, I'm sorry, bud." I said, "That's I said I'm sorry." He's like, "Man, he started. I was like, "Look, do you want to sit down and talk about this?" I said, "If you want to sit down and talk, I'm willing to sit down and talk with you." I said, "But I can't change the past." He's like, "Yeah, let's sit down." And so after about an hour, 2 hours of us sitting there talking, he told me, he said, "Man," he said, "you are nothing like what I was led to believe you are." He said, he said, those people out there think you're some kind of remorseless, heartless, cold-blooded killer." He said, "And that's not who you are." I said, "I never have been." And he's like, he said, "That's if they would have take the opportunity to sit down with you and just talk to you like I have," he said, "they would have a whole different attitude towards you." He said, they need to know who you really are." I was like, "Yeah, I'd I'd like to be able to do that, but I'm not gonna force that issue. If I would anyway." He told me that he was going to, when he got out, he was getting out like a year. He said he was going to go tell the family members, that he'd met me and what his take was on me. And I was like, "Look, I'm not asking you to do that." I said, I don't want to cause those people no more harm." He said, "No, man." He said, "They need to know who you are." And we ended up in the same cell block together and spent quite a lot of time talking about different things, not just my crime, but I I learned I learned a bit more about those families, especially the owners of the restaurant, Pete and Ethel Paris, and their families. Uh, and mainly just from the friendship side of his family, and the business contacts that they had and everything. And because I've never knew these people, and but I don't know if he spoke to them or not. Um, I would I would love to be able to sit down with those people and let them vent. I've said this before. If they wanted to just beat on me for as long as they wanted to, I'm good with that too. Take out their anger and their frustration, their whatever it is, get it out of their system. But allow me an opportunity, and they may not think I deserve that opportunity, but allow me an opportunity just to speak to them, and partly for my own peace of mind, but also for theirs. Because if they are continuing to think that I'm some type of heartless, remorseless, remorseless, cold-blooded killer, then they're still carrying a lot of pain, anger, and hatred around in them, and that's not good for them, right? I don't know. I don't know if some of them would ever change their minds, but I would hope that they would. I would hope that they would see me in a different light. I don't. We all want to be liked by people. Most all of us want to be liked. We want to be accepted by others, and that's another thing that I've come to understand in here is acceptance of others and you know who they are, what their way of life or their background, whatever. Um, and you meet some interesting people when you broaden your horizons a little bit and you're not so narrow-minded. I've found that out also.
Well,
But it definitely opens a door for bad things to happen. That's for sure.
yeah, I really agree. And I know this is off topic, but I remember you saying that you want to talk about your grandpa
Oh
or
yeah,
something,
yeah,
and I thought that was
How you doing, man?
interesting.
yeah. All right. Before I tell you about my grandpa, all right, who was my best friend. He was my best friend, my buddy. He was more of a father figure to me than my dad. He
Was it your
was,
mom's dad?
yeah, my mom's dad. Yeah, his name was Leo, and he was Polish, Leo Buchholz, and he was a big old farming guy. He was probably about 6 foot, 6'2", somewhere in there. Just real, big, heavy set, just typical farmer. Wore the bib overalls every day of his life, and baseball caps, but usually with some type of farm implement or car manufacturer on it or something. But huge influence in my life. But all right, before I talk about him, I want to tell you about this guy that just got out. We call him Gator. He's a Florida Gator fan, so that was his prison name. Went by Gator. A black guy from Charlotte, North Carolina here, and he's been in and out of prison a couple times. And while he's in prison, he seems to do pretty well. He doesn't get involved in the drugs or anything in here. He's a great worker. He was in the treatment program that I'm the PA for the horticulture portion of it. He was in the treatment program, and that's where I met him and got to know him. And good hard worker, just really good people. And real kind of quiet. Somewhere in his 40s, late 40s, but just a really good person. And he was getting ready to get out. The night before he got out, I was sitting on my bunk, which was a couple down from his, and I looked and I seen these shoes that he had. And the state provides us with, if we don't have money to buy tennis shoes, they give us these canvas. They're kind of like cons. They're kind of like the Converse. They're white canvas with a white rubber toe cap, right? They're just a really, really cheap knockoff version of Converse. Excuse me. I was like, Gator, come down here a minute. It's like, sit down on the foot of my bed there. And I was like, those are the only shoes you got to go home with? He's like, yeah. I said, you don't have nobody out there, right? He's like, no. He said, I'm going to a halfway house. I said, what size shoe you wear, man? 5.5. I said, here, try these on. And I had a pair of, they weren't real expensive, 50, 60 bucks, something like that. But I'd only worn them about maybe 10 times. Avias, I think that's how it's pronounced.
Adidas?
Yeah, no, Avia, A-V-I-A, I think. Avia, I don't know, whatever. But decent, nice pair of black tennis shoes. And like I said, I'd only worn them about 10 times. And I said, try these on. He's like, why? I said, just try them on, man. So he puts them on. He's like, yeah, I could see they were a little bit big for him. I wear 10 and a half. But I was like, they fit. He's like, yeah. No, I said, you can have them, bud. He's like, giving me your shoes? I was like, yeah. I said, he's like, seriously, you're just going to give them to me? I said, no. I said, I want you to do something for me. He's like, what's that? I said, when you get out, walking down the street around there, wherever you're staying at, past the church, I said, I want you to stop in that church for me. I said, I want you to go in there and I want you to ask the preacher to say a prayer for me. I said, tell him about, your time in prison, tell him about the East Yard Horticulture Program, tell him about me, tell him about the shoes, whatever you want to tell him. I said, but just tell him about you and I and the horticulture program, and then ask him to say a prayer for me. He's like, that's it? I said, yeah, that's what I want for those shoes, man. He's like, absolutely. He said, he said, yeah, I'll do that. I said, you're going to do it? He said, yeah. I said, all right, bud, thank you. And, I don't know if he has done that or not. And the reason I just wanted to relate this story because there's a couple of reasons that I did the things that I did. One, when he gets out, traditionally when he's got out in the past, he goes right back to the same type of environment, same type of people doing and dealing drugs, and he ends up coming back to prison. He doesn't have anybody out there. I don't know if it's because of he's burned bridges or just lost family over the years or friends or whatever, but I didn't want him going out the door with these cheap ass ugly tennis shoes on. How we look determines a lot on how we feel about ourselves, how much confidence we have in ourselves, how much pride. Okay. And I thought to myself, if I can give this man a decent pair of shoes and he feels better about himself walking out that door, he has a little more confidence in himself, that might help him be successful. All right. Him and I had talked many times about his plans out there, what he was going to try to do, and his goals for, reentry out there in society. And the second thing that I wanted him to do, as far as going to the church, and it's not necessarily about, saying the prayer for me is important to me. But what was more important to me is the possibility that he could establish a relationship with that church, and that they might be able to help him stay on a good road, on a good path. You know what I'm saying? I told him, if you get out there and you start running into, situations where you feel like you're going to slip back into old habits, I said, get your mental health provider out there or your parole probation officer, get them to call up here to the mental health facility, the people that we work for down in the East Yard, the mental health treatment program they got here. I said, get them to call the lady that's in charge of it here. I said, and get her to help you. I said, she'll do that. These people will do that for you, man. I said, don't go out there and try to solve all the problems on your own, because you're probably not going to be able to do that. If you need help, get somebody to call somebody to get you some help, and I hate seeing guys get a chance to get out of here, and then because they don't have the resources, either mentally or material wise out there, to stay out there, they revert back to old behavior patterns, and then they come back to prison. And that just, the fact that they're getting an opportunity to do something that I can only pray for, and then they end up coming back in here because they don't have the ability to take advantage of that opportunity. It hurts. It hurts me. I mean, it hurts to see them just throw away an opportunity to live out there in a free world like that. And so this guy Gator, his last name is Brown, but this guy Gator, I don't know how he's doing out there, but I pray he's doing good. I pray he's doing good. I hope he's successful out there. Charlotte's not a great city, and the area that he's from in Charlotte is definitely not a good part of that city. I mean, Charlotte itself is probably okay, but they're like any large city. There's places that are just, you'd probably avoid her if you could. But anyhow, okay. My grandpa. My grandpa done a lot of fishing and hunting, and he taught me many things, and some of them maybe he shouldn't have, but influences, right? He the first time we went fishing in a boat, uh, I was 4 or 5 years old, somewhere roughly in that age. My aunt and my mom had just taken me to the movie theater to see the movie Jaws. Jaws had just come out, so it was like 74, so I would have been, or 75, I think I would have been 4 years old. I think because Jaws came out in 75, I think. Oh,
Yeah, in the 70s, definitely.
yeah. All right, so my grandpa and he's got a 12-foot, had a 12-foot flat bottom aluminum fishing boat. All right, and a little Johnson, or yeah, I'm gonna say it was a Johnson outboard motor on it, and the oars that you put on the oar locks. So we get to this. There's a bunch of small lakes around the area where I live, where I grew up, lived up in Michigan, and I had a bunch of them. And we used to frequent a lot of them fishing as I growing up. But first time we went to this lake in the boat. We went to Honey Lake, and it's maybe half mile long, quarter mile wide, something like that, roughly that size. Not a real big lake. Um, so we get the boat in the water and we go down to the one shoreline, and it's spring of the year, and the bluegills, we're fishing for bluegills, and they're bedding, and they bed in the shallow water. What they do is they create these little cups in the sand, lake bottom, and shallow, and maybe in about foot water, they create these little bowls, and they'll lay the eggs. The females lay the eggs, and the males come and fertilize them, and then they take turns making sure no predators come eating the eggs. So they're guarding these nests. And when they're on the beds like that, they're really aggressive as far as taking any bait that you throw in the water there. So he gets us up, oars us up, rows us up near the shoreline there, and he's showing me the beds, and you could see the fish sitting right there and everything. And I was, 4 years old. I'm like, this is just cool as hell, right? I mean, he's explaining it to me, and I'm like, this is great. So he backs the boat off, and we set the anchors out, and we're using cane poles, and he'd taken this one cane pole and cut it down for me. So it was, like I said, I was 4 years old, 5 years old. It was maybe cane pole might have been 8 foot long. His was probably 12 foot, something like that. But he shows me how to, bait the hook, and we're just using a hook and a split shot sinker and a simple little bobber, and just loop it out there and drop it on the beds. And you just pull it across them a little bit, and bam, the bluegills hit the worm, take the hook. So he shows me, and he pulls one in, walks me through, talks me through doing it myself with my pole. And that first bluegill that hit, now, and these were pretty good sized panfish, and they were every bit as big as my hand size now, so say 7 or 8 inches long, and big old fat bluegills. And that fish started pulling so hard they would lay flat in the water fighting. And I was like, it scared me, because all I could think about the pull that this fish was putting on this line, it was like, oh my God, it's going to pull me out. I didn't have a life jacket on or anything. My grandpa didn't believe in that, you don't need no life vest. But I was like, he's going to pull me out of and I called him Jaja, which is grandpa in Polish. And I said, he's going to pull me out of the boat, Jaja. He's going to pull me out of the boat. And he starts laughing at me. Well, I'm thinking about this Jaws movie that I had just seen. And we're out here in this lake, and it's really deep, bottom lake, clear water. And we're right there near shore, but still the drop off is pretty heavy, pretty quick. And so I'm like terrified that this dang fish is going to pull me out of the boat, right?
Yeah.
And he's laughing at me, and he's like, hey, on to it, boy, keep fighting. I was like, he's going to pull me out of the boat, Josh. He's going to pull me out of the boat. He's like, keep fighting, boy. Don't you stop. Don't you give up. Keep fighting. Pull him in. So I got this, landed that first fish in the boat there and everything. And we had a blast all day out there. We probably got 20, 30 bluegills. So we left the lake, and he had to stop uptown at the bar where his buddies are at. He had to show them all the fish that we caught, and we're up there, and he's like, tell them about that fish, that first one you got. he said, "What'd you say?" I said, "He's going to pull me out of the boat, Joshua. He's going to pull me out of the boat." And all his buddies are laughing, and he's laughing, and he tells them this story about how I'm fighting this fish and how I thought it was going to pull me out of the boat and everything. So throughout the years, every now and then we'd, even on the phone or at the bar with his buddies or sitting around the house with other people around or something, and he'd say, "You remember that time out at Honey Lake, boy?" I'd be like, "He's gonna pull me out of the boat, Johnny. He's gonna pull me out of the boat." And he'd tell the story, right? And that was all he'd have to say is, "You remember that time out on Honey Lake?" And I knew my lines. And so even here in prison, we would laugh about that every now and then. And he was dying of cancer, and I was at Central Prison, and I was on lockup. And the chaplain there, he knew that, I knew the chaplain there really well, worked for him. And when my grandpa was dying, they pulled me out to the office, and the chaplain let me call him and talk to him before he passed away.
I'll have you a letter in the mail tomorrow, man.
The gratitude that I have for those people for allowing that opportunity is immense. But I'm talking to my grandpa, and he could, he was in pretty rough shape. It was at the end of his life there, and he was really weak and everything. He said, "Remember that time out in Honey Lake, boy?" David, I lost it. I mean, the tears just flooding down my face, and I had to choke it out, but I was like, "He's going to pull me out of the boat, Johnny. He's going to pull me out of the boat." And the chaplain is the only one in the office with me, and he's monitoring the phone call, just my side of the conversation anyway. But he's sitting there watching me, and he sees me crying, and I'm talking about this fish is going to pull me out of the boat. On the other end of the phone, my grandpa's like, "Fight, Ted. Don't you give up." He said, "Don't you give up. You keep fighting." He said, "Get out of there." He said, "Don't you ever give up." I said,
So I get fighting, it's like going through the wrench.
and so anyway, I get off the phone, and the chaplain's like, he said, "Kenny," he said, "I usually don't ask anybody about what they talk to their family about." I said, "You want to know about the boat, don't you?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "If you don't mind."
So you can get on your bike.
By the time I got done telling the chaplain the story, him and I are both sitting there crying. He's like, "Kenny," he said, "I've experienced so many situations with people sharing things with their loved ones." He said, "I have never had anybody share a memory like that or a situation like that with me." He said, "Thank you." He said, "You've got a memory right there to treasure." I was like, "Yeah," because I got a grandpa that I could treasure, and he was a really, really good, strong influence in my life. And again, he was an alcoholic. He didn't see it that way. He thought alcoholics were winos, bums on the street. He didn't realize that you could be an alcoholic and still live a normal life, right? But so he taught me how to shoot pool. He taught me how to fish. He taught me how to hunt. Taught me, a lot of things. But he also taught me how to drink. And I don't blame him for anything. I love it, But there are people in our lives that have a lot of influence on us. And some good, some bad, and some just a mix, right? Just the average. It's, we live life, and people that are in our lives, they make differences. I kid you not, I was listening to the classic country station last night. There was Johnny Cash song on there. And, no, I'm sorry, not Johnny, George Jones. And living and dying with the choices that I've made. He said, "I've had choices." The songs or lyrics go something like this. "I've had choices since the day that I was born. There have been voices telling me right from wrong. If I had only listened, I wouldn't be where I am right now, living and dying with the choices that I've made." And I thought about that last night. I was like, "Geez, that's some of these songs that these guys wrote, or even today, the songwriters, really, really, you can relate to some of them a lot. And,
Yeah, like they've been through.
yes, there's another one, I can't remember the guy that sings it, but it's about, he's going to an AA meeting, and this old man is telling his story, sharing with the group, and he's like, I've been there, that's why I'm here. You know, he's talking about, he's been, you know, the things that he's done and the experiences that he's had as a result of his alcoholism. And, you know, in the song he says, I've been there, that's why I'm here. You know, and he's in AA and in that meeting trying to do right by himself and other people. And, you know, it's crazy when you find yourself living lyrics to some song, you know.
Oh, yeah, I'm a musician. I understand. Like,
Yeah.
this documentary.
Convicted killer Kenneth French trembled slightly and took a deep breath before he said his last words to the jury that will decide his fate.
If there's something I could say, change this, I would. If there's anything I could do, I would do it. I would have done it already. The only other thing I know to do is accept the punishment given by this court and pray you may feel some justice has been done. My last prayer to you is that God strengthens all of us to help us through this, and that he blesses each of us and each of you daily. I'm really sorry. Thank you.
Little Rock police are looking for 3 suspects in an early morning murder. It happened about 2 o'clock this morning at 603 Cedar.